Hi, my name is Charlotte Reed. I'm here at my studio at the Hellman Creative Center where I run my nonprofit business, Art Equals. Today we're going to be doing some fun creative projects that will give you an opportunity to find your own sense of artistic expression and hopefully learn something about yourself. So let's get busy. All right, so today we're going to make junk journals. And I love making junk journals because they use up your old junk and keeps all that junk out of the landfills, which is good for the environment, and I'm all about trying to be friendly to the earth. So let's see what we can make with our old junk. So these are a couple of junk journals I've made in the past. This is my most recent one, and this is what yours is going to look like, similar to this when you're all finished. I've put a button on that, on the front of mine, and a little piece of rubber band to keep it closed, but that's not something you have to do. And I'll tell you that I love coffee, so I save a lot of coffee sleeves. Normally that's something that would get thrown away. You get a cup of coffee and it has that little paper sleeve around it. I find these make really great pockets for a junk journal. So that's what I've done with this. I've even used the bag that my coffee came in, and I've created pages in my book. I've used an old map. So an atlas page. This is some handmade tea-dyed paper that I've done. So lots of fun stuff that you can do with old junk. This is one that I made around Valentine's Day. And this one I actually used some of my old envelopes. So I saved my envelopes from Valentine's people had sent me, and I folded them in half, and so now they're a page. This is a gift bag that I created, put in there, and made a little pocket. Some other old scrapbook paper that I had that I folded up and created pockets with. Let's see what else. This is that envelope, and they make fun pockets. This is some old book pages. Old books are great if you're not going to use them anymore, or sometimes libraries will be getting rid of old books. I like to grab those. This is actually an old magazine page that I used to create the pockets. So lots of fun stuff. And this one over here, I actually created a pocket on the back of this book by using one of my old masks. So if you have a mask that maybe you lost the elastic for, or you have a new mask that you like better, hey, glue it to a page or put it on the back of your book, and this makes a nice pocket for you to stick stuff in, special notes or special trinkets. So it's a really fun thing to do. All right, so let's learn how to make these junk journals. I'm going to clear my space, and we'll talk about the materials that we need. First of all, you're going to need a box. And I like to think about my boxes being about the size that my book is going to be when it's finished. And I hate to say it, but I have gone to the grocery store and actually looked for snacks that are about the size of the book that I want. So I bought this box of graham crackers because I love the size of the box. But you don't necessarily have to do that. Just look in your cupboards and see what's in there. You might find really little boxes. Sometimes those drink pouches come in little boxes. That could make a nice little book. Snack boxes are great. Things like fruit snacks or fruit leather usually come in this style box. But you want to try and find a box that has all the sides. If it has a window in it, that might be a little problematic. You could always cover that up, but sometimes that makes a thin spot in the book. So just be a little bit careful. So we're going to need a box. We're going to need a ruler. We're going to need a pair of scissors, and then we're going to need some glue. And as far as glue is concerned, you can use regular Elmer's school glue or something like that. But what I actually like to use is a little bit thicker glue, so like a tacky glue or something that's a little bit thicker, because I find that it helps the flaps stay down. But school glue works just as well. And then you also want to have some kind of yarn or string. You can even use old shoelaces that have broken, ribbons off of old birthday or Christmas packages, whatever you have lying around the house. This is actually strips of old material. This is what they call sari. These are from the really beautiful Indian textiles that you see the Indian women wear, the saris, and this is when they get worn out or get a hole in them, they cut them up and create these wonderful strips of beautiful colored cloth. So I like to keep this stuff around. So that's what I'm going to be using today. And then the other thing that you're going to need is some junk. So things that you collect: envelopes, paper bags, old pieces of paper. So I've got this is some old recycled handmade paper that I have lying around. Things like book pages, all kinds of stuff. Just collect some junk. You can even use old homework. This is a bag from a prescription from the pharmacy that I saved. So just gather some stuff and we'll use that for the pages of the book, and I'll show you how that works later. Some other things that you might want but don't necessarily need are a bone folder, and this is a bookbinding tool. And while it's called a bone folder, most of them are not made out of bone. There are some that are still made of bone, but this is actually made out of plastic. Some are made out of Teflon. But this basically just helps you to fold and make a nice crease. But you can also use the edge of your handle of your scissors, or you can use the back of your nail to make a nice crease. You may want some clips if you have some kind of pinchy clips or even paper clips or clothespins to hold things down while the glue is drying. And the last thing you may want, but definitely don't need, is a paper trimmer. If you have one of these around, they're really nice for cutting straight edges on your paper to get your paper to fit into your book. But again, not necessary. And I'll show you a reason why I don't use one a lot. That's because I don't like to measure. So let's get back to our box. I said that I usually like to find a box that is about the size of the book that I want. You want to make sure that when you're thinking about books and pages that are going to fit in the book, if you have a really, really large box, you're going to need really, really large pieces of paper to fit in that box. So if you want to use standard sheets of paper, like an 8.5 by 11, which is a standard size that comes out of your binders or your printer, you're going to want to find something that is half the size of that piece of paper. So we're talking 5.5, which is half of 11, by 4.25, which is half of 8.5. So anything larger than that, you're going to need larger pieces of paper. So if you have and it can be a little bit larger, like a 9 by 12 box. I'm sorry, we're talking half the sheet of paper. So you want a box that's going to be about, you could have a box that's maybe 4 or 5 by 6, something like that. But if you're looking at a cereal box, those are usually like 9 by 12. So we're talking some pretty big sheets of paper because you're going to have to double that size. So we're talking 18 by 24 inch sheets of paper. It can be done, but just be aware. All right, let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to carefully take our box apart. So probably you've already opened the top. So we're going to open the bottom. And you want to try and be as careful as possible, but if things don't open quite perfectly, it's okay. But we want to try and preserve these flaps, and I'll show you why in a moment. Okay, so we've got our top and our bottom open, And now any box starts out as a flat piece of paper and gets made into a box by folding and creating flaps. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna find the edge, and I've felt around my box and I feel my edge right here. So this is where the box was put together. And I'm gonna very carefully pull that edge apart. And that way I can open my box and lay it flat. Move this off to the side. All right, so this is gonna be our book. Now let's talk a little bit about the parts of a book. So any book has a front and a back cover. It has a foredge, so this is the edge that goes into the bookshelf, but in olden times this actually would have been the front of the book. They used to shelve books this way with the pages sticking out in a library. The back side of the book is known as the spine. So just like your body, you've got a spine. This is the head of the book, and this is the bottom of the book. Inside the book, we have the pages, but these pages are grouped together in what's called signatures. And we'll talk about those a little bit later when we get to that part of the construction. And these are simply folded sheets of paper that are nestled inside of each other to create these signatures. So there is approximately 3 signatures in this book. And if you look at the top, you can kind of see the gatherings where those signatures. This is one signature here. This is another signature here. And this is another signature here. Okay, so little book anatomy. So when we're looking at our box, we have our front cover, our back cover, and this side edge of the box that is not where it was opened is going to become our spine. Okay, so we want to make sure that we preserve the front, the spine, and the back of our book. All right. Now, we want to make sure that we take a little bit of these flaps off, but we want to keep a little bit of them because we're going to fold them down, and this is going to help to reinforce our book and make it a little bit stronger. So I'm going to go around with my scissors, and I'm just going to cut these flaps down to about 1/4 of an inch from the edge. I'm gonna go all around the box and cut those flaps down. And this is where a paper trimmer would be nice, because you could set this on a paper trimmer and just do one cut and cut that all down to 1/4, and it would be nice and straight. I'm not cutting perfectly straight, but that's okay because we're gonna cover this anyhow. The other thing that you want to do is we're going to be folding these flaps down, and you can see where those are going to fold down. But in these valleys where these are going to fold up, there may be a little bit too much cardboard, and those flaps might actually bump up against each other. I don't think it looks like that's happening here because the flaps are cut in such a way that they're kind of angled in. But if you have a box that when you fold the flaps down, those edges are touching, what you might want to do is simply fold your edge back like this and cut. And I'm just putting my fingers on the edge so I know where that is. And then cut a little tiny angle there, not much, and that gives you a nice edge. So it keeps too much material from binding up there, and then that makes sure that it doesn't keep it from closing nicely when you've got the book all done. So we're gonna go around and cut all the edges, and especially this edge that is a full flap on this side. Make sure that we cut that down. And here we've got another issue. So we only need this flap to cover this part. So this piece up here, that's extra. So I'm gonna just kind of tear that off a little bit. And again, I'm gonna angle this just slightly to the corner so that when I put that in there, it's not going to go above this edge. And I want to make sure that this edge, this flap coming down doesn't lay over, so I'm going to again cut that at just a slight little angle. You don't want to cut too much off. Just a slight little angle. And that way they lay over each other nicely. Okay? Now we're going to glue these flaps down. Now I haven't cut all my corners because I'm gonna show you how to glue the flaps down, and then I'm gonna move to a piece that I've already done. But I'm just gonna show you really quickly how we're gonna glue. We're gonna put a little bit of glue on that flap. If I can get my glue to come out. I usually try and keep my glue bottles upside down in a jar so the glue is always right at the tip when I'm ready for it. And I'm gonna take my finger and I'm gonna make sure that I get that glue out to the edge of the flap. Oop, take that off. Because what I don't want to have happen is that flap to not be glued down at the edge and come up. And this is where it's really nice to have those clips, because I can glue that down, and because that cardboard wants to kind of pop back up, I'm going to put my clips on there. And if you just have paper clips work well too. And there we go. Okay, I'm going to get something to wipe the glue off my fingers. And we'll move on to the next step. So you'll glue all your flaps down and let them dry. And when you're all done, it should look like this. So our flaps are all glued down and we're ready to go. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna cover our book. And this you can do in a couple of different ways. You can actually cover your book with some paper. So I've got some paper that I actually kind of crinkled up. This was old paper, and I kind of just crumpled it and made it all kind of textured, and I put some watercolor, some markers on it, so gave it some pretty colors. And I can cover this book. And the way I would do that is I would actually glue my book. I would glue this whole surface and make sure that I get a nice coating of glue. And usually this is when I like to really use my finger or even a brush. I put the glue on there and I brush the whole surface of the book, and then I lay it down on the paper. And you'll notice that my paper is a little larger all around than my book. And that is so that I can bring the paper around and make sure that the edges get covered. If you want more information about covering books, there's lots of wonderful bookmakers out there that show you how to cover books, but I don't want to waste too much time doing that today. So I'm just going to kind of give you an idea that you can cover your book with some paper. The other thing you can do is you can actually paint your book. So you can actually take a piece of sandpaper and give this a light sanding just to get some of the shiny coating off of it, and then use a little bit of acrylic paint and paint your book. One thing you'll want to be kind of notice is that because paint is wet, when you put it on your cardboard, it may actually warp your book just a little bit, but just wait until the paint is dried and then put that book under some heavy weights, like some old books or a paint can or something like that, to kind of press it down and then let it continue to dry flat. And your book should be nice and flat. The other thing you can do is just leave your box the way it is. Maybe you want to create a book that looks like the box that it came out. Maybe you want a Cheez-Its book, or you want a Fruit Snacks book, or a Fruity Pebbles book. Whatever you want, this is your chance to be really, really creative. So I've got a cover that I've already done. This is my book. It's covered. And I've actually covered the inside because if I just leave the edges where I folded over the outside paper, I'm going to still see some cardboard. So I've taken an old map, and this is an old map of Over the Rhine, and I've cut it to fit inside the edges, just leaving a little bit of the edge of the paper from the outside showing, and I covered that up. So now my book is all ready to put the pages in. So let's talk about pages. Our glue wants to be in the picture. Okay, so I said we can do things like envelopes. So envelopes have a natural fold, and we're going to want to find places where there is a fold so we can catch those to put them in the book. So I've got this edge. I can actually sometimes I will take another piece of paper and I will wet this up or even just put some glue on there, and I will glue another piece of paper to the flap of that envelope so that I can create two sides. And you'll notice that my pages aren't the same size. That's okay. I actually like pages that are not the same size because I think it makes my book more interesting. But if you want all your pages to be the same, that is okay. This is your book, and there's no wrong way to do your book because it is yours. But this is one way to use your envelope. The other way you can use your envelope is to actually fold it in half. Now this is a pretty small envelope, but you could fold it in half like this, and then you would have one half of the envelope as a page and the other half of an envelope as a page. You'd probably want to do this with a little bit bigger envelope, and I would probably tuck this flap in, and that would allow me to use these then as pockets. So when this page is all done, I could have this as a pocket to put something in. And I love putting pockets in my junk journals. But I'm gonna actually use this envelope this way. And I'm gonna put it on this piece of paper, and then this creates a pocket here. So that's kind of why I like to use envelopes. And this can be an old envelope, it can have the writing still on it. And even if you've had an envelope that you tore across that somebody opened with a letter opener, that makes a great pocket because the top of it is open. So don't throw that away either. So let's see what else we have here. I've got some old plastic that I just folded in half. And you want to make sure that all your pages are going to fit inside your book. And I always like to leave a little bit of room around my biggest page. So this is the edge of the back. I'm going to line my paper up there, and you can see I've got about a 1/4 to 1/8 of an inch on the top and the bottom, and maybe about a 1/4 to a 1/2 an inch along the edge. And we want to do that because when the book gets closed, the book cover is what's going to protect the pages. If those pages come all the way to the edge, when we close that, they might actually pop out a little bit. And when you're pushing those onto a shelf or moving those around, those edges will get damaged. So you always want to make sure that your pages are just slightly smaller than your book if you want to keep them protected. If you don't mind them getting all kind of roughed up, maybe you want that look, and that is certainly okay too. But you can see that I've got, this one comes a little bit close to the edge, but there's still enough to protect it. And this is actually some old, this is an actual grocery bag that I've cut up. And I actually made this a little longer on one side, and I folded it over and glued the top and the bottom. And that gives me a little place to tuck something in there. So I folded that in half. I've got another piece that I left long and I haven't glued it. And so when this is in the book, this will be a part that will pop out and I can write something or draw something on there. So that's another piece. This is a piece of junk mail that I got. And this folds out to create this kind of brochure. And so what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to just use this crease here to create my page, and then leave this like this, and when it's in the book, again, it will open up. So I can do all kinds of stuff on here. I can maybe paper mache over this, or I can glue something on this to cover some of this. I could paint this, all kinds of stuff I could do. I could even cut this a little bit, glue the top and bottom, and create a flap. Or I could cut this at an angle and create like a folder pocket like you see in your binders or your school supplies. Just cut a corner off of that, glue it here, and you've got a pocket, glue it here and here. Sorry, you need to glue the bottom. But then you've got a pocket so that you can put all kinds of stuff in. Okay, so let me gather my pages together and let's create some signatures. So we're going to create our signatures by taking all of our paper that we're going to put in our book, and we're going to fold it in half, like I said. And I'm going to take all these things and I'm going to nestle them one inside of the other. So this is my outside page. I'm going to put another page inside there. I'm going to stick this one inside there. I've got this kind of dark colored paper, and again, it's a different size, but I don't care. I like that variation. Got another piece here, and I usually like to do 3 to 4, maybe 5 pieces of paper, depending on how thick. This one's pretty thick, so I may put this in a different signature. So I'm going to put that to the side. That's one signature. So it's got 4 pieces of paper that have been folded and nestled inside of each other. Now I've got this one. I'm going to put those 2 inside. So this is on the outside because I think that's kind of cool. I may just keep that the way it is. And I think I might stick this one in here. And that looks pretty good. Oh, I've got another piece of this. Let's see. Actually, I think I've got 2 brown pieces. I'm gonna stick this cream colored piece in between. And that's probably enough for that signature. So I'll put that to the side. And I've got one more signature that I'm gonna work on. Got some paper in here, some old handmade paper that I had lying around that was kind of scraps. So I'm gonna use that. But I also want to use this paper bag. Now, as you can see, this paper bag, if I line it up with the edge of the back edge, it's too long. It's gonna stick out. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna figure out where it needs to set. So I'm gonna put it right there. And this is the back edge, so I'm gonna fold it right there. Okay, now I wanna cut this so it's even with here. I could easily use a pair of scissors and just snip that off. But what I like to use a lot of times is just a ruler. I'm gonna line that up with the edge where I want it. And then what I'm gonna do is just tear. And part of the reason I do this is because I don't like to measure stuff. And the other reason I do this is because I like this nice torn edge. It gives it kind of a rough, feathery edge that I like. If you don't like that, go ahead and use scissors or that paper trimmer. You can measure everything if you want it to be precise. Some bookmakers are very, very precise in the way they put books together and measure everything. I'm a little bit more loosey-goosey with the way I put my books together. So I'm gonna put this paper bag in here. And this paper bag can be fun because you can put something on this bottom flap and it can actually fold this way, or you can open it up and it can fold back that way. So it's kind of a fun little trick page, which I kind of like. And then the other side of the paper bag opens up and you can actually stick stuff in there. So you can store your treasures in there. I could have actually, now that I think about it, I could have actually left this on here and you could have folded that over and like paper clipped it, and that would have held your treasures in there. But maybe I'll have to figure out a way to keep that closed, or just, you know, stick stuff in there and not worry about it. Okay, so now I've got my 3 signatures. Actually, I've got 3 signatures, and now I'm ready to put them in my book. So I'm gonna grab my strings. So I've got this Sari fabric strips. And now we're gonna bind our book. And this is a really nice non-sewn binding. There's lots of ways to put books together. And if you're interested in bookmaking, there's lots of really great videos on YouTube, really great bookmakers out there. And if you're really interested, Cincinnati actually has a book art society where you can take classes and they'll teach you how to create books of your own. It's a really fun group. Let me show you, this is a book that was actually, the pages are sewn in. You can see the sewing here. But we're gonna do a non-sewn binding. And it's really, really easy, and I like this binding a lot, and I'll show you why in a minute. So we're gonna take a piece of string, we're gonna open up our signature, and we're gonna find the middle page. So this is our middle page, okay? And what we're gonna do, I'm gonna stick these to the side real quick. I'm gonna put my string right through the middle. I'm going to lay it on my spine, and then I'm going to pull the strings around to the back, and I'm gonna tie it onto the spine of my book. Holding my finger there so I get a nice tight tie. And then I can adjust where this falls. It can either go up at the top. I can tie a bow with my leftover ribbons. I could cut them off so that they're closer to the knot. You don't want to cut all the way to the knot because then your knot might come loose, but you could cut them closer to the knot, or you could leave them long, and you could actually do fun stuff like attach things to your ribbon. So here on this book, this is the sewn binding, but I've created some tassels, and I've actually attached some charms to the long ribbons. So you could attach charms or beads or slips of paper that have messages on them. So anything you want. This is where this book really becomes your own. So I'm gonna put that in there. I'm gonna move this kind of to one edge because I want to leave room for my other signature. So we got one signature in there. Now I'm going to take my next signature, again, find the middle, and that's really important. If we don't find that middle, this page might not get caught up in the ribbon and will fall out. So putting the ribbon through the middle, I'm going to wrap it around to the outside of the spine. Move these out of the way. And again, I'm going to tie a knot. And let me give you a little tip on tying knots. You saw me use my finger to hold that knot down before. There's something called a surgeon's knot. And when you cross over and you bring one end under, that's one wrap around. If you go one more time, wrap that around one more time, that actually acts like your finger and it holds it in place better. And so then you can tie the second part of your knot, and you can wrap it around again, and that will make a very, very secure knot. Okay? I think I'm going to leave that one right there, but if you wanted to line all your ribbons up so they were hanging in the same place, that's fine. Again, this is your book, so there's no wrong way to do your book because it's yours. So let's get this last signature in here. Another fun thing about this way of binding is if I decide, I really wanted this signature in the back, what I can do is I can scoot this signature over, scoot it towards the back of the spine, and then I can take this signature and I can put it in between. So I'm going to find the middle of my signature again. One last piece of yarn, ribbon, whatever you're using. I think shoelaces would kind of be fun. I'm going to make sure that I'm going to tie it in between the other two. And there we go. Okay. So now we have our book. We've got our signatures are tied in. They're not going anywhere. And the nice thing about this binding is our pages are in there, but if I decide, I really wish this page had been over here, I can actually very carefully slip these pages out, and then I can slip them into another section. So it makes this book very versatile. It's kind of like a no mistakes book. Now, the only problem is that these pages do slip out pretty easily when you're pulling on them, so you can't yank your pages. But when your pages are in there and you're carrying them around, they're not going in there. They're staying in there. Now, when you're finished with your book, the real fun starts, because this is where you can really get creative. So this is where you start to personalize your book. And some suggestions for personalizing your book is you can write in this book, you can journal on the pages, you can draw, you can color, you can paste things into here, like if you have stickers, if you find interesting labels off of boxes or packaging, you can glue them right in here. You can cut articles out of magazines and put them in here. If you have some of those pockets, like I've got a pocket here, you can stick stuff in there, special notes, whatever you want. This really becomes your place to play and express yourself. So I hope you enjoyed yourself. If you'd like to join us for more junk journaling classes, go to the website artequals.org, which is ART-EQUALS.org. And you'll find events for upcoming junk journal workshops where we will work on our junk journals and actually make all kinds of interesting pockets and other things that you can fit in your junk journals. Hope you enjoyed this. It was great to be with you today, and be creative.